And welcome. This is Errol Williams here. I want to say welcome and thank you so much for joining this webinar. This will only last for around 15 minutes, so I only have 15 minutes to share with you. And I want to share with you an, on a one verse, in fact, just one verse I'd like to share with you, and it's a verse which has been so very, very close to my heart. It's Proverbs 23 and verse 7. So let's get started then, shall we? And it reads, "For as he thinketh in his heart, so is he." Just that phrase I want to look at, first of all. The second part says, "Eat and drink, says he to thee, but his heart is not with thee." I also want to look at it from the easy-to-read version, Proverbs 23, verse 7. They might tell you to eat and drink all you want, but they don't really mean it. They are the kind of people who are only thinking about the cost. Okay, let me look at the English Standard Version. "For he is like one who is inwardly calculating. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you." Good News Bible says, "Come on and have some more," he says, but he doesn't mean it. What he thinks is what he really is. And I think this is a thought I want to leave with you. What he thinks is what he really is. And the phrase I'd like to use, "so is he," or "so are you." The verse of scripture here I really, really do appreciate because it says so much about us and to us. For as he, the word he is not to be looked on as a masculine just from the male point of view, but the word he is for both genders, he or she. So it makes no difference whether you're male or female. And it goes on to say, "For as he thinketh." So it seems here that the responsibility of the thinking is placed on the person doing the thinking, he or she in this case. So your thinking is your responsibility, especially if you are of age, an adult, and you are responsible for your life. You're also responsible for the way you think. For as he thinketh, notice now, where does he think? In his heart. Now, when we talk about the heart here, we're not talking about the physical heart that pumps blood around the body. We are talking about the inner man. We call the heart. Some people refer to it as the soul. In the NIV version talks about, "For as he thinketh in his soul." The soul is oftentimes referred to as the mind, the emotion, and the will. Now, we know that it's not talking about the physical heart because we can have a heart transplant. You're still the same person. They can put somebody else's heart in where yours used to be, or they can put a plastic heart that does the job of pumping blood around the body. So we're not talking about the heart. The late Dr. Miles Monroe once said, "For as he thinketh in his heart, for as he thinketh in his mind, so is he." And the message today that I want to leave with you is, so is he, or so are you. You are the end product of the way that you think. Now, there is research, I've been told, that has been done to indicate that we have between 12,000 and 70,000 thoughts per day. Now, that's a lot of thoughts. 12,000 to 70,000 thoughts per day. The research goes on to say that 70% of those thoughts are negative. 70% are negative. So you have to examine yourself and ask yourself the question, if it's really true that you're having 12 to 70,000 thoughts per day, ask yourself the question then, really, what are you thinking about throughout the day? What really are you thinking about? Secondly, the things that you're thinking about, are they positive or are they negative? Notice what the Proverbs is saying. "For as he thinketh in his heart." For as this person think, so is he. So you become your thoughts, or should I put it another way, you are your thoughts. Now, if you're thinking negatively about yourself throughout the day or throughout the week, year, or months, what do you think will happen to you? If you're saying things to yourself like, "I'm no good, I'm stupid, I'll never make it, I'll never really achieve, I'll never have money, I'll never get married," etc., etc., what do you think you're really saying to yourself? Well, let me share with you, in fact, another proverbial statement from the same King Solomon. And I'm going to go now to Proverbs chapter 18 and verse, I believe, verse 21. Now look at what this verse says, and I'll just mark and indicate it. It says, death and life are in the power of the tongue. Death and life are in the power of your tongue. So I want you to think of it this way. Whenever you speak, you're actually speaking death or life. Now, the only difference between thoughts and words, from my perspective, is sound. So the way you think and the way you talk are identical, but the only difference is sound. So whether you think it or say it, it's the same thing. So if you're thinking negative thoughts, you're actually destroying yourself. Now, you could be your worst enemy. Your enemy may not be who you think they are, but your worst enemy might be you. Now, it may be true that somebody somewhere along the line have said some negative things to you when you were a child or a young person growing up. You don't have to believe what they've said now. You don't have to accept what they've said. You can say, you know what, I refuse to accept those thoughts. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to have those thoughts running through my mind. I'm going to make absolutely certain that I have life-giving thoughts. I'm going to think positively. I'm going to use positive things to think about rather than to think negatively. So remember this. Be very, very careful of the way you're thinking. Think about what you're thinking about. Take a rain check about what you're thinking about. Maybe at the end of the day, for example, is to sit in the chair and to think throughout the day, and to just sit in the chair and just to meditate about the things that you went throughout the day, and maybe examine some of the thoughts you've been having. Were they positive? Were they negative? When you're hurt, when somebody does something wrong to you and you're not happy about it, what type of thoughts do you have? I'd like to say to all you parents as well, be very, very careful what you say to your children. Things said to children are very, very powerful, because your child or the children that you're speaking to may well believe you and accept what you've said, and it may well affect their lives in later years to come. I've experienced that when I was around 12 years of age. In fact, literally 12 years of age. I'll never forget. I can actually tell you the exact date. In fact, I remember that much. When a member of my family stopped the car I was traveling to come to England and said some very horrible things to me. All those horrible things came through because I believed what she said. I was only 12. One of the best things you can do for your children is to give life-giving words. Speak life-giving words to your child, to your husband, to your spouse, to your friends, to your family. Why use death words when you can use life words? Things like, I love you, I appreciate you, it's great being in your presence, you're a wonderful person, you're magnificent, I just love being around you. Why not use life-giving words rather than negative, death, destructive, depressive, discouraging words? Remember what I said, going back to Proverbs chapter 23 and verse 7. Let's go right back there now, Proverbs 23, which is here, and verse 7, here we are. Remember this as I close out, that you are your thoughts. The things that you think about will happen in your life if you keep doing it. If you have negative thoughts about yourself, you're going to eventually affect yourself. That could be one of the reasons why you're so depressed or so downtrodden or feel downhearted, is maybe because of the way you're thinking. Your thought processes. What really are you thinking about? Be careful what you allow to come into your mind. Be careful what you let in. Now, I want to show you a scripture. In fact, I'm not so sure I'll be able to remember. I remember exactly where it is. I believe it's 1 Peter. Let me see if it's chapter 2. And no, it's not the one I'm thinking of. Let me see, though, if I can find where I'm looking for it. I will be able to say what it is. Maybe I can do a search for it. Let me do a search for it. For those of you who don't know, I'm using eSword. That's the one I use. I've been using it for years. It's the best I've found. It really is awesome. If you want a tour of it, then leave a comment in the box there. And if you want, you can talk to me as I'm talking to you now. All right. So I know it's in Peter. So I know it's in Peter. So I'm going to just type in one word, gird. First Peter 1, verse 13. Okay, let's go. First Peter chapter 1 and verse 13. Here we are. This verse. Let's mark this verse. And so I could look at it. Here it says, wherefore gird up the loins of your mind. I tried for many, many years to try and figure out what that was saying. Gird up the loins of your mind. The word gird means to strengthen. To strengthen. And it says, gird up the loins of your mind. I remember going to my doctor and asking my doctor, what is the loins of your mind? The doctor says, I don't know. I was quite shocked. I thought the doctor should know and would know. I went to a child psychologist, and she was a Christian, and I asked her, what is the loins of your mind? And she says, I believe it's a scripture, but I don't know what it means. Well, I was listening to a tape for over a year about the mind, and after I finished listening to it, it dawned on me that one of the things that the doctor had said was that the loins of your body was the region of the reproductive organs. So the doctor knew that, but did not know what the loins of the mind was. So I deduced that the loins of the mind is the region of the reproduction of thought. What that's simply saying is this, is that be very careful what you listen to and what you look at. Because the loins of your mind is the distance from your eye to your mind, your ear to your mind. Because what happens is if you don't strengthen and gird up or block things that comes into your mind, the loins of your mind, the things that you see, the environment in which you are in, you will bring destruction to yourself. So my strong suggestion is here is the loins of your mind is that you are very, very careful about what you see, about what you hear or listen to. Because the region of the reproduction, it talks about the pathway, how information gets to your mind through what you see, what you hear. Be careful of the people that you associate with. Be careful of listening to them. You want to be around people who are going to speak life into your life, not death, not negativity. For example, you may get an idea that you want to write a book, and then the people around you are telling you you can't do it. You don't have the education. Those are death and killing and destructive words. Why not encourage you? Why don't you encourage your friend? I think that's a very good idea. Oh, I know you can achieve that. Go for it. And then if you need my help, I'll help you. I told myself for 5 years I couldn't write a book, and I didn't, because I told myself I couldn't. Now, who was my worst enemy in that situation? Of course, it was me. And the moment I believed that I could do it, I ended up writing 4 books. In a moment, I'll be concluding on the 5th, and soon the 20th. So I want to close out on the verse that we started with, Proverbs 23 and verse 7. Let's go back to that verse. Proverbs chapter 23 and verse 7. Be careful of your thoughts. Be careful of what you think about. Now, one might say then, what should I think about? Well, I'm glad you asked that question. So let me spend a few moments just sharing with you what I believe you should be thinking of. So I'm going to go to my favorite book, in fact, which is Joshua chapter 1 and verse 8. It's even here marked for you, Joshua chapter 1 and verse 8. Now, not verse 9, so just verse 8. What's going on here is that God was speaking to a new leader by the name of Joshua. Moses was now dead. The servant of the Lord has now finished his ministry. Someone else is about to start his ministry, and his name is Joshua. So God is speaking to him. I'm not sure how God did this, but God is speaking to him, and he said, this book of the law, it shouldn't depart of your mouth. Now, the book of the law at that time was the 5 books of the Old Testament known as the Pentateuch: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Those were the only books that Joshua had. And so God was saying to him, this book of the law, it mustn't leave your mouth. You must constantly speak about the things that are in it. I want you to notice something. The Roman Catholics today, and I love those people, they have 73 books of the Bible. Well, the church in which I'm in, we have 66. Now, my point is this. Joshua only had 5. I have 66 books in which to think on. But at the time that God commanded him, he only had 5. And the 5 was enough for him to spend the rest of his life talking about. So God is saying, this book of the law, it must not depart from out of your mouth. Then he said, but you should meditate, think on these things and this book. In other words, study it and meditate upon it. In other words, think on it. Regurgitate it as you go through your day. When should you do it? Night and day. Notice this. Now, they didn't have social media back then. Didn't have mobile phones back then. Didn't have television or the media like we do today back then. But God says to him, night and day. Don't let it stop coming out of your mouth, but think in it. Now you see what you could be thinking about. Now, many of us, we're worried about the bills. We're worried about our relationships. We're worried about our families. We're worried about life. We're worried about things going on in the world. I'm not saying we ought not to be concerned about those things. But God, in his infinite wisdom, is saying, meditate upon this book, the book of the law. And then thirdly, he says to him, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that's written therein. So you must speak what's in the book, you must meditate on what's in the book, and you must act upon what's in the book. Then the Lord goes on to share some more information to him. He says, for then you will make your way prosperous, and you will have good success. You see that? So is he. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So the indication here is this. You can become prosperous following this particular methodology. Now, I hear a lot about, prosperity teachings, and a lot of them, what I hear is absolute foolishness, because the way I believe in prosperity, is according to this verse. Follow what God says, and you will make your way prosperous. It's not God who is going to make you prosperous. It's you who's going to make your way prosperous following what God says. So if you want to have a prosperous and a successful life, going back to Proverbs 23 and verse 7, is to make absolutely certain that the things that you are thinking about is going to take you where you really want to get to. Proverbs 23, verse 7, the title of this message, so is he, so are you, so is she, based upon how you're thinking. So be very, very careful how you're thinking. Now, you may have been thinking very negatively over the last few years, but you don't have to do so from today going into the future. What you think about is really up to you. How you think about it is really up to you. Why you think about it is really up to you. No one can control your thinking. We can put you in chains and throw you in prison and forget about you, but we cannot control how you think. It doesn't matter what people say, think, or do to you. Your thoughts is your control. It's your responsibility. It's up to you. I like what Helena Roosevelt said. No one can make you feel inferior without your permission. No one can do it. So if you're feeling inferior right now, take responsibility and say, you know what? It's my fault. Yes, I know people said some things and did some things, but I took what they said and I made it my own thoughts. You don't have to make it your thoughts as of today. Take charge, take control, and be the person that you want to be by thinking differently. Well, thank you so much for listening in, and I want to say again, well, thank you so much for tuning in to this webinar. Again, my name is Errol Williams. I will be here every Monday and also every Thursday, and I will be posting it. So if you want to subscribe or so, please do so, and you will indeed get the information when I do come on. So take care of yourself and your family until next time. Bye for now.